Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. Today we are taking a look at that 2022 Clemson spring game that is just finishing up right behind us. We're going to give you guys our thoughts and opinions, some players that maybe stood out, and stuff to look forward to as we get into that 2022 college football season. Dill, I'm going to kick it to you. What did you like most, or what were the biggest things that stood out to you that you liked during this game?
I mean, they're the exact same team they were last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, their offense for the first, whatever portion of the game couldn't execute a thing, which is basically what they couldn't do last year, which was just string together drives. They'd hope they could make a big play here and there, and that was all they had. But again, I think you saw the similar weaknesses. I think the quarterback play wasn't great, and the offensive line wasn't good enough. So I think you're going to have a very similar team. Awesome defense, front seven's elite, and you better hope you just can make some improvements on offense. You're going to look again and have, I think, a similar year.
Yeah, what I want to highlight out of this spring game is just how dominant this front seven could be. We saw Georgia kind of be one of the most dominant defensive fronts that we've seen in a really long time. I think Clemson is just as good as they were last year. I mean, we saw guys like Xavier Thomas, KJ Henriques, Tyler
Miles
Davis,
Murphy. They couldn't block them on any play.
Yeah, and I mean, I think part of it was the offensive line is banged up, but quite frankly, that offensive line was pretty bad last year as well. It's definitely something that Clemson needs to figure out because you have good quarterbacks. Like DJ's a talented quarterback who we saw miss some throws. He settled in a little bit later, but it was a rough first three possessions.
I'm not convinced Dabo didn't tell them to stop playing defense because, for the first portion of the game, they couldn't get a first down. They'd get sacked every time they dropped back, and
yeah.
Then it looked like maybe they took the foot off the pedal a little bit and, okay, let's try to let our offense do something because when the defense was playing, they didn't look like they could move it an inch.
Yeah, let's talk about the QB battle because I actually do think this is a quarterback battle. DJ really he needs to earn that spot again because, quite frankly, it was really ugly. He got pulled multiple times last year. And Kate Klubnik, I mean, didn't look any better than DJ, but I think that was just – it's going to be really hard for Dabo to evaluate these quarterbacks in live scrimmages because they couldn't run anything with that defensive line down on it.
And DJ, Dabo's cutthroat. I mean, he gave it to Trevor Lawrence over actually Kelly Bryant, who was winning a ton of ball games. And DJ hasn't even won them much yet. So Dabo's not afraid to go with the freshman, I don't think. If he thinks they'll win with him, he'll do it. And yeah, it's tough because I don't think either of them looked great, and I don't think either of them had a great opportunity, frankly, because that offense just doesn't have an imagination and the ability to kind of just execute basic plays.
One of the things I'll note before we move on from the quarterbacks, because it really is hard to evaluate the quarterback position with how good that defense was and how poorly that offensive line was blocking. DJ looked a little slimmer. They talked about it on the broadcast. They were obsessed. He lost 20 pounds, but he was able to extend a few plays that I don't think he would have been able to do last year, which I think is optimistic. But part of DJ's game last year when he was running the ball was being a big body and kind of falling forward and being able to break some tackles. So I wonder if that aspect of his game maybe takes a dip. I overall
might have to sprint him out, though, and get him out of the pocket.
Yeah, that might be.
I don't think they're going to be blocking people again. So
yeah. Talk about the offensive line rotation real quick. Obviously, they were banged up. I thought Will Putnam was the one guy who I thought was moving people around a little bit and looked good. Jordan McFadden, I think, will be a solid tackle for Clemson, but they got a lot of work to do. I heard Dabo was thinking about going to the transfer portal at the end of spring practice, see if he can find another depth piece because not only do they struggle with depth, they're young and they're quite frankly, that first team offensive line doesn't appear to be very good.
It's young to an extent, but it's also just they've been young for a couple of years now, and it's these guys are aging, and you just gotta play. They gotta play better football.
It's hard to see
across that board.
It's hard to see if that offensive line is really that bad, or is that defensive front just?
I mean, it was that bad last year, so I don't have any reason to And if in college, I think there's some level. If you get dominated that bad by anything, it's probably going to struggle a little bit.
Yeah, it's I kind of agree with that. The wide receiver room, Joseph Nagata is a guy that we talked about last year coming into our Clemson summer previews. He's a guy that he flashed last year in the spring game. He flashed some during the regular season, but he's a guy that hasn't been able to stay healthy, hasn't been able to put together extended times of being consistent football player. Hopefully, this is his year. This is his year because they kind of need some boost with that pass catching unit. EJ Williams had I think one or two good catches, and Bo Collins didn't play. Um, but that's it's a receiving room that Clemson's used to having really, really good football players at. Think about Hopkins, Sammy Watkins, Hunter Renfro, Mike Williams. It's historically been a good room for the Clemson Tigers, and it doesn't look to be that dominant a room this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to see EJ Williams make that play on the jump ball. I like that. This ball like a DeAndre Hopkins catches. That's what your number one wide receiver. The DB didn't play it that well, so you would like to see him make that play. Yeah. In Nagata, you're right. It's like if Nagata could give you all 12, 11 games,
yeah, he's good.
And play at that level, he's a sick player. He's a sick player. And so they better hope Nagata can like stay healthy and be solid, because he's probably the most talented guy who has a chance to be the leader of the room, I think, at this point.
Now, we haven't talked a lot of optimistic about this Clemson offense. I think one aspect of this offense that you can be pretty optimistic is that running back room. Will Shipley, Kobe Pace didn't play, but going back and watching the film of Will Shipley, I am so excited for him and seeing the development that he can make from his true freshman year to that second year. That's where you see guys put on that muscle, kind of grow into their body a little bit. It's really rare to see a true freshman in nowadays college football be dominant in year one. And Will Shipley was pretty close to being a dominant football player. I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. Wish we could have seen him in that spring game, but we did get to see Phil Maffa, who's his same age. They're roommates. They're really good friends. What did you see out of Phil Maffa that you liked? I thought he was pretty solid today.
I know Phil Maffa actually was one of the bright spots on the offense. I think he caught a couple checkdowns, which
it was good.
DJ made some decent throws to him. So
the 10-yard check down.
That's what I think. Like, yeah, well, I mean, you find the positive in what happened today for the offense was checking into Phil Maffa and letting him work. And he looked for a bigger looking guy. He's got some shake and he can move.
He really does.
So he looked like he'll be. And I'm not a huge Kobe Pace guy. I didn't think he popped off the field, so he very well might take that second spot. And
I think he will. And I think Will Shipley, should be the feature of that offense, because I think he is the guy who has the most special traits. Obviously, a 5-star kid out of high school, really good out of the backfield catching the ball. He's very shifty. I thought he ran pretty hard last year too, but that should be a room where they're pretty good. They recruited well. I think Will Shipley is going to headline that group. But one thing I also noticed about Phil Maffa is he's really good in pass pro. Took on Trent Simpson a couple times in pass protection, did a really good job. I mean, he's got the body too. Short, stout, strong dude, physical. He did a really good job. He put the ball on the ground once, which I think he put the ball on the ground twice. One, they blew dead, but I mean, he was taking a lot of carries because they didn't have many healthy running backs. But I do think this will be one aspect of the offense that you can be pretty optimistic about. Now, let's turn our attention to the defense, because I think this defense is going to be the best in college football. Maybe Alabama would be the one competing, and Georgia will be up there too. But this Clemson defense is just freakishly deep and talented. I mean, they got 5 stars, top 10 recruits just littered in that front 7. Talking about the D-line first, Miles Murphy's unblockable pretty much. I think you saw Kate Klubnik have that little sprint option out, and Miles Murphy played it perfectly. I mean, it's hard to deal with a guy who's that fast, that rangy, that.
Yeah, I mean, there's just that's just such a good unit. I know that's what we headlined with, and I think that's what this unit is going to have to carry this squad, because the
defense
are elite. And if you have an elite defensive line and like that elite, like what you saw at Georgia, they just swallowed teams. Teams couldn't. There's nothing you could do. Couldn't run it. Couldn't pass it. And yeah, I think they certainly have the potential. I think they might even be a little better on the edge, frankly. With KJ Henry looked like a first-round pick, like on the that size, that length, and being able to be fluid. And I know he's had a tough career really with injuries, but he's finally getting healthy and in playing like the kind of the first-round draft pick kind of player you kind of want him to end up being.
What he was a recruit to be. One thing Dabo Sweeney talked about was his maturity. He's a fifth-year guy. He came in, and that was one. I mean, I'm not a huge Dabo Sweeney fan. I've made that pretty clear on the show. But it was cool to hear Dabo Sweeney kind of give his insight about certain plays, but just more the players, their backgrounds, what he thinks of them as men. And Xavier Thomas was one of the guys that he was talking about a lot and really impressed with. But you look at that defensive front, and they got like 5 guys who could be first-round draft picks: Miles Murphy, Brian Brzee, Xavier Thomas, Tyler Davis, KJ Henry. The list goes on. And even the young guys in the 2 deep are really good and dominant. And that's kind of what Georgia had to rely on too. It's going to be
this year with them. They might even get a little better at the linebacker unit because
I think they do get better.
As good as Spector and Skalski were, they weren't pro prospects, and like you're not talking about them now going to the draft or anything. You might have, I mean, Trotter. I know Dabo is raving about his dad. Obviously, the famous Jeremiah Trotter was elite linebacker for a while in the NFL. And Trenton Simpson, like you might have a very good, more versatile, pro-ready group at linebacker.
I think this is a way more, lacking experience. I think Trent Simpson's the oldest, being a third-year guy. But Trent Simpson's a guy that I remember watching as a true freshman. I mean, and he's extremely versatile. I mean, he can blitz off the edge. He was covering tight ends in the nickel today. He can kind of do it all. But my thing is like James Skalski, Spector, like they were just capped athletically a little bit. And I think that's why you see them not project into the NFL that much. Like Skalski was an awesome college linebacker in terms of being smart, tackling between the tackles. But Trent Simpson, Jeremiah Trotter, and then Carter Barrett. He looks sick with the 0 number. Oh my God, he was swagged out with that 0. That's like one of the coolest looking linebacker numbers I've seen. But all those guys were extremely impressive. I think this linebacking room gets better, quite frankly. I mean, if they can be experienced and not kind of make the immature young player mistakes, like they are much more athletically equipped to be dominant, and they're going to have an easy job because they're behind a defensive line that's one of the best we've seen in the last couple of years. And then to cap off the defense, the secondary, I think this is probably the worst aspect of their defense, but it's not necessarily by no means bad. Obviously, to lose a guy like Andrew Booth is tough to replace, but I was noticing more because they only had, I think Dabo said, 3 scholarship cornerbacks ready to roll for the spring game. But a guy that I highlighted is Toriano Pride Jr. He's a high school senior, an early enrollee. He was flying around making some.
Okay, you can just say true freshman. I hated that Dabo kept saying that high school senior nonsense. He's, for all intents and purposes, they're true freshmen. I get the technicality and I get what he's trying to do, but
it doesn't show the point. He's only been there for 2 years.
Yeah, we all know he is though. When you call him a true freshman, and not adding anything, so you can relax with your Dabo ball watching. But
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, no, he did look good though. I'll give you, as much as I disagree with that label you're slapping on him. He did look awesome, and they're gonna need somebody to play corner because I think again, even when you go back to last year, that was their weakness. They did give up some big plays in the past game, and if they can just be solid there, this defense will be out.
They're gonna have such an easy job, like behind the defense. Like same thing with Georgia. Like those Georgia DBs
still gotta do it.
Going into the season, Kirby Smart harped on how nervous he was about the DBs. He straight up used the word nervous. But you have a really easy job when quarterbacks aren't going to even be able to step up in the pocket. They're just going to get swallowed up. So yeah, you said it, for like they have to do it, but they're going to have an easy job.
But like when the ball's in the air, I'm thinking of that play on like a long third down that number 9 caught, the wideout. Like those are the plays that are going to have to not be allowed. When the ball's hanging up there, people are going to have to make plays on the ball. And I think that's what they didn't do last year consistently enough. So hopefully if they can just do that and make plays when the ball's fluttering, they'll be really good.
Yeah, and to wrap up the spring game, again, I don't want to read too much into the spring game, but it is fun to see some live football, see some of these young guys go out and make some plays. There's not an ACC team that on offense, will be able to score on Clemson. I think the ACC, I mean, this is kind of stating the obvious. The ACC runs through Clemson. They were a team that turned it around the second half of the season. We'll get into a full summer kind of preview when Dylan and I go back and watch some Clemson games from last year, kind of give you our take on how they're going to look fully in the 2022 season. But this defense, they looked the part today. The offense obviously needs some work in the summer, but it's kind of hard to say because they're going up against some of the best defensive players in the country. And so you see how they'll look against a Wake Forest defense. I think they'll be able to score 30 points, and Wake Forest ain't scoring 30.
Yeah, but we're acting like this is like Clemson's offense was really bad with the same group last year. So it's like,
yeah,
you think you would have liked to see some improvements, and I just think maybe you didn't today.
And Tony Elliott's out. Tony
so.
Elliott's out, and I'm a little optimistic about that. Tony Elliott ended up getting a job, but like I would have, if I'm Clemson, I would have considered firing him because, quite frankly, last year was absolutely pathetic on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it was. It was really bad.
So getting some new play calling, just some new eyeballs on that offense, some new development guys.
Well, but they did just promote from within those. How new everybody's eyeballs are going to be.
It's the first time we've seen Dabo Swinney have to do this, so it will be an interesting year, and we'll highlight that again.
He's been fortunate with play callers on both sides, frankly. So.
Yeah. So that's a wrap on the Clemson 2022 spring game. Obviously, we appreciate you guys watching. If you guys are into this kind of stuff, want to see our summer scouting videos, go ahead, subscribe, like the video. We'll be pumping out these videos during the summer. We are very excited to get into the film again for that 2022 college football season. And we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.